With us this afternoon, criminal defense attorneys Vic Bajaj and federal trial attorney James Frantz. Thanks both for your time. Vic, to you first. Would you have put a nurse on this jury if you were the defense and or the prosecution? Does her experience help either side in your estimation?
Yes and yes, it helps the defense. And as a defense attorney, I would always look towards the jury instructions. And these are the instructions that are given in a pamphlet to the jurors when they deliberate the case and the charges after the case evidence is closed. And in Minnesota, we have a very similar reasonable doubt jury instruction as we do throughout most of the states in the union, which basically says if you have two interpretations of the evidence, one reaches guilt and the other reaches innocence, you must adopt the one towards innocence. And you can only adopt reasonable interpretations. So with that backdrop and with that umbrella, I would say it is an excellent juror to have on this case because cause of death is the utmost important issue in this case. And of course, if there are multiple causes of death, that strikes at the heart of the prosecutorial theory that Officer Chauvin is solely responsible for the death. So I think it was a great decision on behalf of the defense.
James Frantz, in your experience, do people with a skill, like in this case, a nurse, is there a fear or a possibility that she can take over the deliberations and be the expert in the jury room?
Ted, good question. She can be the resident expert in the case. She may very well be the cardiac nurse. It's a major issue in the case. It is the issue on the cause of death, how it happened. And the amount of time that he was without any air is extremely critical. And she pointed that out. I think, frankly, she'll be a great, potentially, but no one knows yet, a potentially great prosecution juror to have. That's just my take.
Yeah, all right, well, good. We've got two takes. I like that. One going defense, one prosecution. Let's talk about the next juror, one that was seated yesterday, late yesterday. She is juror number 91, African-American woman in her 60s, grandmother, relative works for the Minneapolis Police Department, but says she's not in constant contact by any stretch with this relative. She did see the news of the $27 million settlement, but says it wouldn't sway her. And she says she saw some of the video of George Floyd's death. She says she seldom watches the news, though, and had a measured response when asked about her opinion on the Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter movements.
You were asked a couple of questions in terms of both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And with respect to Black Lives Matter, you had a very favorable response, and you wrote, "I am black and my life matters."
It does.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with like the more organizational or political organization Black Lives Matter?
Not real familiar, no. Just know what I've seen and heard.
Okay. Now, in Blue Lives Matter, you had a more neutral approach or view of them, and you say everyone is important, and my family member is a police officer.
Correct.
Right. So you'd agree with, I guess, the premise that all lives matter.
Yes.
Vic, some people might say, oh, she's black, she's good for the state. Is that always the case, though? And what's your take on 91?
Absolutely not. You know, the elephant in the room that we've talked about a number of times is race and how Black Lives Matter may interpret race relations vis-a-vis law enforcement interactions with citizens or non-citizens in the U.S. But race is front and center. And frankly, it's offensive to always have descriptions of potential jurors as black or white, or in some cases self-identified as multiracial. And while that is accurate, I think it emphasizes the wrong item. You know, when you say someone is Caucasian, and if there's a crime against a Caucasian, a victim, you cannot bet your client's future on a juror who's white having sympathy for the white victim in the case. The same is true here. I think it's a fatal error to pick and choose jurors based upon their race. I don't think the parties are doing that, but it's clearly an emphasis And it's an understanding, and in my opinion, a great misunderstanding. And James can speak to this. He's handled a bunch of trials, as I have. You can never judge a book by its cover, so it's really a slippery slope. I think the media has caused a great interference with people's perception of race relations vis-a-vis this case and the charges, and that's what we heard from this potential juror. So it's a dangerous area to be in, and you see the lawyers and surely the judge executing a very well-orchestrated tightrope act in this matter.
James, your opinion on... I love your point, Vic. I love your point, but also you have to acknowledge that this is a unique case in that race is a part of it, and the way that African Americans have felt that the system has not worked for them for decades, and what George Floyd's death did
That's right,
to this
but
country.
This is not a civil rights case.
No,
Yes,
but
this
is it?
not a
Are you
civil
saying
rights
it's not an
litigation.
underlying
This is a
current?
criminal case against an officer. Yes.
Absolutely, and to your point, I don't think Eric Nelson. Look at the jury. I mean, he is not striking jurors on the, because they're African American. Because look at this juror, the jury panel as it sits. James, your opinion, your thoughts, picking up where Vic left off.
Yes, I agree with Vic in many respects. You can't judge the book by its cover, but remember who she is. I think for the prosecution, she may be a good witness. She knows the police department, and she knows that implementing this type of a measure where you take away someone's air for a considerable amount of time is wrong. It's a bad police procedure. So putting all the black and white aside, just the police side and the restraints that they use, I think she may be a good witness for the prosecution in that respect. And I think she may give a fair shake to black versus blue. She seemed like, from the comments, that she was a pretty even-keeled person. That's my view. But
I think that age has a part of this equation too. With her, she has experience, right? She has life experience that both sides can tap into, and I think the defense thinks she's a good juror for that reason. All right, juror number 92 was the last one seated yesterday. She is a woman in her 40s, works as a client advocate, has not seen, she claims, the full video of the George Floyd death, and strongly disagrees with defunding police. Here's more of what she said about the idea of defunding the police and her views on the mainstream media.
I guess maybe what I was going by was a blurb that they had on the news where people were saying that they wanted to do like a community outreach instead of have law enforcement present, and that I guess would terrify me.
How do you think that would work out?
I don't think it would work out very well.
Okay.
No.
Why is that?
I mean, just look at riots. I don't think that it doesn't seem to quite solve the problems. It does look like, for I guess what's portrayed on the media is other races aren't necessarily treated fairly.
All right, Vic, this is a white woman in her 40s, and so a little bit younger, but also with some life experience. What about the fact that she strongly disagrees with defunding the police? Do you read more into that, to James' point, that this is a lot of this case is about policing and your thoughts on police?
Absolutely. Are you pro-police or are you anti-police? That's really what this case is about, because, starting with that emphasis on whether you support Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, you then have, a lens, a set of glasses, and you put that lens on the juror's eyes and you say, am I allowing you to look at this and interpret the evidence as though all police officers are bad and racist? Or are you putting that a different set of lens saying, well, the officers conduct themselves the right way and officers have a tough gig and we need to protect their actions given the fast-moving interactions with those in the public? So it is, again, front and center. But again, we cannot judge a book by its cover, because I've had many cases where I've had a certain ethnic background of a defendant, client of mine, and a panoply or a myriad of people of different races on the jury. And those jurors, after we're done, have absolutely floored my team and I at their responses and what our interpretation was of what we expected. So in this particular case, an individual may believe in Blue Lives Matter, may believe in the tough job that law enforcement officers have, but may also believe that there are bad apples and they need to be prosecuted. It cuts both ways.
Yeah, and James, at the bottom line, you're really taking the juror at his or her word when they are asked, can you put, because everybody has an opinion with this one, because there's been so much out in this public sphere, can you put your thoughts and your feelings behind you? What is your experience in terms of the percentage of jurors that do come in with good faith and do execute their job in good faith?
My belief is most of them come in exercising good faith. They're doing their civic duty, and this is what it's all about in our American justice system. She's not here to do something that's wrong or going to harm others. She's here to do the right thing, the conscience of the community, we like to call it. But look at this case as a police malpractice case. We do a lot of prosecution in the civil side. And what he did with the restraint he used and how long he implemented it. So she can say she's not for defunding the police. Well, she's talking about police that do their job correctly. But I'm sure she has an exception for police officers that don't do their job right or violate the procedures and the rules. And so I think she may be a fair juror for the prosecution, but who knows? Like Vic said, it could cut both ways here. But that's my take on it.
Yep, great. All right, we're going to step aside, take a break. We'll have much more, including the daily sidebar, when we return. Stay with us.